Hi, Denny Johnson again, and I thought I would answer a question about how is Rayid different? Well, Rayid is a composite of many things, and I'd like to share with you very briefly how these different parts work together. The first part that I've always had for about 35 years is the study of the iris as a reflection of the soul. Yeah, I know that's a lot to consider, that the eye in some way is some degree reflecting the quality, function, or capacity of the soul. So when we examine these different constitutional patterns, and by constitution I mean what does it look like and feel like? So here is the same person. This is the left eye and the right eye. And we look at these differences between the two eyes, and we look at the different colors and shapes and the different positions. And what would the pristine soul look like or feel like? So for me, when the pristine soul enters into incarnation, it now comes in and acquires a degree of genetic or causal memory. Eventually this causal memory and parts of it are also the epigenetic memory. These are epigenetic patterns in the iris. If you look at these other people, and this is not the same person, you look at the different types of configurations. You see that they are like snowflakes. They are different. This constitution is noticeably different than the others. And there's many, many types. This is a close-up picture of one area of an iris. Could it be possible that these individual characteristics or different shapes and the topography of the vascular system of the iris, could they actually mean something about the forces affecting the individual? There are, of course, many differences, but there are similarities. For example, obvious ones like the shape of the pupil, the size that occupies the area, the general constitution of the eye, the fact that it's round. It's one of the only parts of the body that's truly round. In this whole process, you can look and see that there is a lot here to be understood, felt, and realized. So is it possible to discover the underlying influences that are operating to express or feel the soul? In some way, what do we learn? Why are we here? How do we progress from one stage to the next? So, the other part of Rayid is the family tree. And for me, the family tree is what creates this topography. And the unseen influences of the 14 ancestral patterns, the mother and the father and the 12 grandparents, and how all of these are in some mysterious way represented inside of here. I mean, the truth is I know very little about the iris compared to what we will eventually know or understand or feel about the iris. There's so much more that is not well known. Rayid is not like any other system of the iris. It's not iridology. It has a similarity, but iridologists primarily use the structure of the eye for being able to look at the physical function of the body. I like to be able to see it for the function of the soul and its relationship to the family. Why is the family tree so important? Well, for me, the incarnation of the soul, the bridge between spirit and matter, is the family. So to be able to look at this bridge, you see not only where we came from, what we're passing through, where we're going. So the family tree dynamics means so much to me, to be able to understand the forces of the differences in these eyes. What are the different forces? So part of this, and at the very core of a lot of the Rayid study, is the difference about the ascending and descending forces. Now, there is no system in psychology or allopathic medicine or naturopathic medicine that really uses the ascending and descending forces. There are some in Chinese medicine and the acupuncture system, but the ascending, descending forces, to me, well, They're at the very core of understanding the work and at the very core of understanding how to use therapies without really utilizing the knowledge of the ascending and descending forces. Two of these ascending and descending forces from the father's family, two of them from the mother's family. These ascending and descending forces and the experience of the soul in the body, these are things that are very significant to know. How the iris constitutional pattern is affected by the position of continuum in the family. By that, is this a number 1 girl? Is this a number 2? Is this a number 4 girl after 2 boys? I mean, the variation in how to interpret this information is completely altered by recognizing, is this pattern primarily emanating from the father's side of the family? Is it emanating from the mother's side of the family? For me, it's just very difficult at all to really do a successful iris interpretation without knowing this additional information. And is it really possible to be able to say, so if somebody has a cough that's affecting the lungs, that there may be a specific place in the family tree, somebody has a pain in their liver, or they have a cancer, or they have high blood pressure, can it be related to a specific topography that's modified by all this? Yes. That's why it's so unique, is it uses information not only about the soul, but the soul's experience through the bridge of the family in a place I would call the spiritual body. And the spiritual body is the bridge into the material body. So what's happening in the material body, and some very obvious things like pain, suffering, and disease, is oftentimes more a reflection of what's happening in the family dynamics. Now, epigenetic science is recognizing that the influence of the ancestry is very much involved in providing triggers that create disease and suffering. So how are they formed? Where do they come from? Is there an underlying knowledge that gives us the means to be able to work with it? If we can have an understanding that a specific form of jealousy or rage in one of the ancestors is actually the precursor of the diabetes that someone might have, is it possible to be able to use that knowledge and be able to transform this or accept the responsibility for why we might have this condition? That's really what the iris and the family tree dynamic's about. But this ascending and descending force, it is a powerful tool, because when we learn how to activate the descending yin qualities, the descending yin qualities emanating through the mother's side of the family, they regulate everything from the sleep cycle to the skin, the gland, the pineal. They regulate the experiences of being able to move water or matter through the body. A whole series of things about creativity and imagination and self-image. And then the other one, the ascending yin, which has everything to do with regulating the metabolic function of the body. Regulating the metabolic function is very important. How is the breath actually related to the metabolic function? How is the experience of the pancreas a relationship to something to do with treachery or betrayal or jealousy? It's not a common system that will talk about how the pancreatic function is affected by treachery or betrayal or jealousy or greed. There's not many systems that describe that. These are not commonly used terms and characteristics. So one channel is the channel of elimination, the other channel is the channel of metabolic function, but it's also the channel related to self-awareness through resolution, or how to solve something, understand something, how to desire something, and what is the primary dilator of creativity anyway. This is what this function is about. On the other side, the descending yang, having everything to do with protecting the body, stabilizing the body, healing the body, and integrating the body into the world. I mean, it's a very important function. Yes, it's about digestion and the immune system. Yes, it's about the liver and the autoimmune system's function in relationship to the nervous system. that whole descending yang function. Yes, if there's a difficulty in one part of the family that disturbs one of these lines, you get characteristic symptoms. For me, virtually all symptoms of the human body or the human psyche in some form or another is related to unresolved issues in the family tree that have been acquired or increased by the experience of the soul's incarnation into the family. Wow, that's a lot to consider. No, this is not an easy thing to learn in a few hours. No, this is not a system whereby you gain access to some rarefied study. No, you don't become a person like a psychologist or a PhD of something. The Rayid system is not about certifying and regulating and controlling or monitoring people or saying who's qualified, who's not qualified. Now, Rayid doesn't do that. This is an experience for you to be able to know you a little more, and the only way really to discover it is to apply it on yourself. So please, if you choose to investigate some part of this, then test each part of it. Some of them are just very difficult to test with anything other than your own feelings, like, is there a soul? There's no scientific evidence that will tell you that there is the existence of a soul or a spiritual body. The only way to really test it is with the clarity of your own logic and your own feelings. So it comes down to this. We're describing this as a soul. How does that feel? Does that feel like it's possible? Then progress one step further, and then you'll be able to find out that the characteristic patterns of the brown dots in the eyes, they are primarily a seeking, thinking, intellectual type. The open webs, they have different personalities, emotionally reactive types. And you'll be able to confirm that all of these different personality patterns are all modified by the birth order position. It doesn't take long. Take a look at 10 number 1 girls and 10 number 1 boys. You have children of your own. Examine them. Do you see how they are part of the topography of what a number 1 boy or a number 1 girl really feels or acts like? What a remarkable thing. If you could understand small children when they just come into the world, maybe even when they're conceived, and we can recognize the forces that are affecting them for the rest of their life. Then Rayid also has something else that's not available in any other system of understanding personality or body or mind. It's about the timeline. This timeline is a timeline about how the times of the day, which is also part of different systems of Chinese medicine. There are systems of being able to use the meridian structure in times of the day. I don't relate to that, nor do I deny that. I use the functions of the times of the day and the seasons of the year and the stages of life. There is the spring of life and the summer of life, the autumn of life and the winter of life. All of these are significant. So yes, does it make a difference when a particular iris type and a birth order position has a particular crisis or challenge at age 24, has a disease that starts at age 38? Yes, all of these are part of the influences that are very important. So that's how we use it. That's why it's so different. But also there's something else about the Rayid method of being able to look at the world that's very different, is because we also look at it this way. All of these patterns of the cycles and seasons of life lead back to something that's very much like the structure of the iris. So the structure of the iris for me is not always something that's in my head or in my body, but it actually represents the field of life force around the body. And now that becomes a reflection of the topography of a map, much like the shape of the iris, where you and I go through a progression of experiences for countless years after we leave this world. So what really is the significance of being here in the body? Why are we here? Where did we come from? How can we progress? What can we do more of that brings us in harmony with love and life? So when I look at the iris, I think of the sequences or the spheres or the steps, the ladder to life, the ladder to something higher, whatever that may be. So when I'm examining the iris, I'm always thinking about where does that go? How is this particular soul, in its own unique personal way, going to travel through the topography of the family tree, having social emotional experiences and attractions and kids or not kids? How is this soul passing through all of this, through all the cycles and seasons of life, to progress beyond this life to the experience of the eternal increase of its own awareness and love? That's really why Rayid is so different. It's so different. No, it's not going to be very well recognized in my lifetime, and well, probably not even in yours. But that doesn't mean we can't use it, benefit from it, add it to the things that we know. So that's why Rayid is really so different. See you again.